Exclamation mark. In the middle of the destroyed construction site filled with mutilated corpses and stained red by all the blood that had been spilled, the gathered martial artists were giving Pan weird looks. What? Exclaimed a flabbergasted Cyril Rahman, having been caught off guard by Pan's response. Yeah, you heard me. What does it really matter that your so-called leader tried to use all of you for his own ends? That hasn't really anything to do with our fights. We can all agree he is scum and what he ultimately wanted was not of your agreement, but what about what you want? As it is, Yami is no more, their armies are destroyed and its leadership is in shambles, as I'm pretty sure most of you will not be willing to keep being part of the organization that betrayed your ideals, and those of you who doesn't mind and still wish to be part of Yami I can easily deal with on my own. So effectively and immediately, I'll be taking over your organization, its assets, resources and connections will now be mine. Pan declared in a no-nonsense tone that harbored no argument. Most of the remaining Grandmasters were not surprised by her decision. You have certainly proved you are as strong as you claim to be. I have no qualms of you replacing our current leader, especially after these latest revelations. Akira Hongo stated, glancing over Senzui with disapproval. But what does that have to do with us resuming our fights? You have already achieved the goal you came here for in the first place. Yami is no more, and what is left is now under your command. In light of that, all you have to do is force us into swearing loyalty to you, and we will practically have no option but to agree, since there is nothing we can do to stop you. You have already proven yourself the strongest and the winner of this confrontation. He said, pretty reasonably. Indeed, that's true, but regardless, all that is not important at the moment. What is important is if you all are going to let something as feeble as the betrayal of your leader to get in the way of the battles you all been eagerly waiting for as martial artists. I mean, this is what you wanted, isn't it? To battle a strong opponent that will force you to go all out and push you to your limits, but now that your wish is finally at hand, are you simply going to let it pass by you and shirk away from it? Where is your pride as warriors? Pan stated in an assertive tone. We can still have the fights we've wanted. Ishinsai turned at her in surprise, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Pan nodded in confirmation. Of course, we Saiyans do not care much about whatever may be happening around us, as long as it doesn't directly interfere in our fights. And for a Saiyan, a direct intervention will be someone physically getting in our way. Our pride as warriors doesn't allow any kind of distractions from taking our attention away from battle. So consider this a test from your new boss to see who among you are worthy of joining my ranks. She stated with a fair share of self-complacency. Whip just turned at her with a deadpan. You are just looking for an excuse to have more fights, aren't you? She said dryly. Pan wasn't frazzled that she had been caught on and replied with a snort. Well, excuse me for wanting to have a little bit of fun. I'm just too powerful for these world standards to have a challenging figure of my own. The fight I'm about to have with Kushinada will not even qualify as a slight workout for me, since the difference between our levels is just too abysmal. I'm just simply going to test her skills by letting her hit me with her strongest attacks and see what happens. So for the most time, I have to make do by watching other people fight to their limits instead of me, otherwise I get bored. She then turned to look at Whip directly with a dark look. And you don't want me getting bored, do you? For a moment Whip remembered all those pranks and practical jokes that Pan decided to play on her and the rest of her followers as part of their training just because she had nothing better to do. She shivered internally at the memory. Certainly Pan and boredom were a terrible combination. It seemed most of her fellow fighters were in agreement, as they too were grimacing at the memory. No, she finally replied in a cowed tone. Pan just beamed a smile in satisfaction and turned back to the remaining Yami masters. Just as I had thought. Very well then, what will be your answer? The Grandmasters mulled over her words and shared glances between themselves. Eventually they reached a decision and nodded in agreement. We'll fight. Akira Hongo replied in behalf of all. Excellent. Pan replied, beaming a happy smile. Sother smirked at her antics. So, you're going to have matches between any opponents of your liking. Now that's interesting. Maybe I'll deem myself gracious enough to watch your little fights after I've dealt with a certain vermin once and for all. He said darkly as he glanced towards Senzui with a frightening stare. Pan cocked her head to a side in thought. How about if you two join us in our matches and you deal with Senzui in a proper fight instead? You know, to give him a chance to die like a man. She suggested offhandedly. Sother raised an eyebrow in response. That would be giving this maggot more honor than he deserves. However, your suggestion is not without merit. Sure, why not? It'll be fun to humiliate him before I decide to end his life. The cruel Nanto master replied with a devious grin. Senzui appeared as if he were about to lose his mettle at any time and flee, his fear for Sother easily visible to all. Pan put an end to whatever idea he may have to take his chances and escape. You better don't try to do anything stupid like trying to escape, because if you try I'll cut you down myself with an energy blast just as I did with Sigmarigan. She warned with a fulminant glare. Either you fight and die like a man, or I'll kill you and you'll die like a dog. It's your choice, however, you may have a slight chance of getting out of here alive if you by some miracle manage to defeat Sother. If you do, I'll be gracious enough to allow you to walk away from here with your life intact. She said with a carefree glance. Sother just laughed at her bargain offer. As if this lowly insect would have the strength to defeat me. Why do you think he concocted such ridiculous plan in the hopes of dealing with the Nanto sects? Because the weakling knew that never, in a million years, would he be able to match the strength of Nanto with his own useless style. Pan just shrugged unconcerned at Sother's boasts. That may be so, but you never know, maybe he'll get lucky and achieve the impossible. I'm sure more outrageous things have happened in the past of this world, but ultimately, it all depends on his decision. Will he try to escape and suffer an ignominious end, or take his chances and fight his way out of here alive? Senzui just gritted his teeth, knowing he was cornered with no other hope but to accept Pan's offer. Fine, if he is to die in here, at least he would go down fighting, maybe he would be lucky enough and drag Sother with him to hell. It seems I have no choice. I'll fight. He grudgingly accepted. Pan grinned with a toothy face-splitting smile. Now that's what I'm talking about. Alright, now that we are all in agreement, let's go on with the show. She declared with eagerness. Mihaisterby interrupted her before she could continue. What about the rest of us? I care not what you decide to do with Yami, since that doesn't mean I will decide to follow you. But I've still been waiting for the chance to spill some blood in battle and I will not simply let myself be ignored. Either you give me a chance to fight too, or I'll find some other way to satiate my bloodlust. He declared with a deranged look as he caressed his weapon and glanced at the wounded fighters around the field. Pan just ignored his outburst with practiced ease, though internally she was labeling him as a security threat and need to be put down in case he gets too rowdy. I'm sure some of the remaining Nanto masters will be more than glad to accommodate you. She commented with fake absent-mindedness. Yuta smiled with a devilishly grin as he stepped forward. Allow me to give this nuisance the fight that he wants. I'll make sure to spill enough blood to satiate his urges. He declared as he stretched his fingers to show the sharpness of his nails. Pan acknowledged him with a nod. Very well, I'll leave it up to you. Feel free to go all out if you want. Wouldn't be fun if I were to put restrictions on such remarkable fighters like yourselves. After all, these are no-holds-barred matches, she said before turning to the remaining grandmasters that were yet to be partnered with someone. How about the rest of you? Do any one of you feels like taking a shot against one of the remaining Nanto masters? Only Oganosuke accepted her challenge for battle. I do not agree with you taking over Yami. I fully intend of fighting against your takeover. But I will not say no to a chance to wet my swords with the blood of a worthy adversary, so I will accept your offer. He declared with a harsh intimidating glare that he focused upon the short alien girl that he towered over. Pan was completely unaffected by this, however. Very well, that is your opinion. Now move along and take your place in the line. Let's see who might want to have a small tussle with you. She said as she looked around the field for an appropriate opponent for the deadly swordsman. It was Ray who stepped forward this time. I would like to be his opponent for this battle if you don't mind. He asked courteously. Pan agreed with his request without any complaint. If that's what you want, go ahead. She then turned back to the few Yami masters still alive. So that's it. None of you want to step forward? She asked in mild disappointment. Mildred Lawrence just slumped her shoulders in dejection and looked down for a moment before answering. I am sorry, but my will to fight has already been broken. My bow, the only thing in this world in which I can unconditionally trust, has failed me for the first time. She said, glancing briefly towards the direction of Dr. Jackal. After this defeat, I now know I am not as strong as I once believed myself to be. So no, I'm afraid I will not be able to give a decent fight in my current mental state. I would prefer if you gave me the chance of looking over my apprentice's injuries instead. She humbly requested as she motioned to her injured apprentice lying at her feet. Pan didn't answer to her immediately. Instead she turned to stare at Hyugo in full as to prompt him for his answer. The blonde boy just shook his head and waved a hand in front of him in refusal. Sorry, I know when I'm too outclassed to even put up a token resistance. I doubt I would last more than a few seconds if I decided to challenge any one of you. Unless you have an opponent among your ranks that's more close to my level, I'm afraid it will not be a much entertaining fight, more like a one-sided beating. And I'm not stupid enough to jump willingly into something like that if I have a choice. He stated, turning down Pan's offer as politely as he could. The alien girl took a moment to consider his words before replying. Well, there's Candy over there who still hasn't fought against anyone, and there's also Diana too. Pan said, pointing at the two individuals in question over her shoulder. Hyugo just smiled and let out an amused laugh. Ha, I'm not that easy to fool. Not to be rude or anything, but I think I'll pass. I saw what your cyborg friend did to Master Cyril's apprentice, so I don't think I would be able to do any better against a completely robotic opponent. Who knows what kind of alien tech you have put inside of it. As for the other woman, her partner managed to eliminate Master Reiki without breaking a sweat, so I must assume she must be pretty close to that level of skill. I doubt I would be able to fight her evenly even if I were to go all out. So, no, but thanks, I know better than to try to fight in losing battles. He refused gently. Pan took a moment to appraise the young apprentice in front of her with a critical eye before speaking again. Very well, if that's your choice, I suppose I cannot fault you for refusing a fight with such overwhelming odds against you. At least it's good to know that you know your limits well and be smart enough as to not get yourself in a situation where you are so much over your head. Anyway, fine, you two can stay put off from this last set of fights if that's what you want. However, I will be considering your refusal to fight as an automatic forfeit. And since I've declared myself the new head of Yami, that means you two now serve me. Is that understood? She said with a serious leveled stare. The archer woman acquiesced with a nod. I understand, you have proven yourself the strongest figure, so now whatever is left of Yami is under your command. We will follow you without complaint and pledge ourselves into your service if you wish. Mildred declared, kneeling and bowing in front of Pan to show her submission, Hyugo following her lead and doing the same too. Very well, as long as you know who is boss, I don't think we're going to have any problem between us. So go on, get out of here and go wait with the rest of my group. Pan replied, beaming a happy face. Both fighters nodded in acknowledgement, went on to follow their instructions wordlessly, dragging their wounded with them. With that out of the way, Pan finally turned to the awaiting group of fighters. Alright, seems there are no more distractions. Let's get this done already, she declared as she signaled Mills Lane to approach the group. So are you finally going to end with all this, or do you need more time to have a bit of tea? The senior referee snarked in an irritated mood. He was clearly fed up already of all the shenanigans that he has had to endure since he was dropped in here. Certainly just being standing in here was detrimental for his health, as at any given moment another crazy martial artist with delusions of grandeur could appear trying to pull another outrageous stunt. Yeah, we're good. Just start announcing the fights, Pan demanded, ignoring the sarcasm. Alright, so everybody go to their places and get ready, Mills ordered, making the last group of fighters to prepare for their battles. Souther signaled the referee to have a word with him before starting the matches. Before we begin, I'd like to make something clear. My battle with this maggot in front of me will be to the death. No surrender or knockout allowed. The match will end until one of us two stops breathing, he declared with an ominous stare. Mills Lane wasn't surprised by that request and simply turned to address Senzui. Do you accept these conditions, son? If you do, no one will be able to interfere with your fight until only one of you is left. he asked with a serious demeanor. Senzui knew there was no turning back now and steeled himself for the battle to come. Yes, I accept, was all he said as he tried to hide his nervousness with a mask of fake calmness. Not that he was able to fool many, as beads of sweat could be seen clearly falling from his brow, betraying his inner turmoil. Mihai interrupted the proceedings with his usual tact. Hey, I want to have a deep match too. I want to ensure no one interferes with my fight until I kill my victim. He boasted as he looked upon Yuta with a deranged face. The master of Nanto Kokuku Ken just covered his mouth with the back of his hand in a dainty gesture as he laughed at his opponent's declarations, clearly giving his opinion about the matter. Don't care right now, we'll see about what you want once we turn to your own battle. In the meantime, shut up and let me do my job. He snapped at Mihai before turning back at Sother and Senzui and signaling them to come forward. All right, let's get this show on the road. This is going to be a battle to the death. There are no rules to be followed and no penalties to be applied, so anything goes. There is no time limit either, so this battle will only end until one of you kills the other. Do you gentlemen understand these conditions? Mills said as he glanced between the two fighters, who replied to him with sharp nods. Very well then, let's get it on. The senior referee declared as he pumped his fist and moved aside to let the battle commence. Fall of Yami final round. Senzui vs Sother. The terrible successor of the Nanto Ho Ken simply chuckled as he made a come at me motion at Senzui with his index finger. Come, let me put an end to your misery, Sother said with a frightening as his bloodlust became palpable to any viewer. Senzui tried to repress a shiver and braced himself for what he believed would be his final battle. Mills Lane was between Toki and Cyril Ramon, preparing to announce their battle. All right, you two, you're next. This will be a no-holds-barred battle, so whatever method you try to employ to achieve victory will be at your discretion. The battle does not end until only one of you is left standing. Any questions? He asked to the two fighters, who simply remained impassively silent and waited for him to continue. No, then let's get it on, he declared with his usual signal before moving aside. Cyril Ramon vs Toki. The elder Kalaripayatu master offered a bout at Toki before beginning. I am honored you've decided to grant the wish of this old man and show me the skills of Hokuto in honorable combat, he said with a pleased smile in his wrinkled face. Toki replied with a bow of his own before speaking. The honor is mine, esteemed elder. Let's us simply do our best and give our all on this fight, the young man said, taking a stance. Now Mills Lane was standing between Pan and Kusinada. Okay, I guess you both know the rules, the elderly referee asked, glancing between to the women. Yeah, whatever, just give us the starting signal already. I'll take care myself of the specifics of this fight, Pan said, waving him off in dismissal without taking her sight from Kusinada. Mills Lane just grumbled a little before complying. Fine, have this fight however you may want. At least it will save some time to end this thing early so I can finally get out of here. With that said, let's get it on, he exclaimed with his usual fist pumping before moving on. Pan vs Mikumo. Kusinada. Pan just smiled even more at her opponent. She dropped her guard and let herself open to any attack while she goaded Kusinada to come at her. Come on, give me your best shot, I won't even move. Let's see how long it'll take for you to realize that even your best efforts are meaningless against me. I just hope you are prepared to keep your word and become my slave once you lose, she cockily said, an innocent expression, not even considering one bit the possibility of being defeated by the Earthling Grandmaster. Kusinada refrained from commenting, and then vanished in a burst of speed, only to reappear with her fist impacting on Pan's skull in full, followed by a stream of hard kicks that slammed into the alien girl's chest. Kusinada knew that if she wanted to have even the slightest chance against such unbelievable powerful opponent, she would need to go all out from the beginning and try to overwhelm her with an endless barrage of punches in the hopes of keeping her from counteract. The century-old beauty kept landing hundreds of supersonic attacks in the span of seconds upon the unmoving body of her opponent, each impact being accompanied by deafening thunderclaps, the strength behind each punch being strong enough as to release streams of destructive shockwaves that traveled through Pan's body and broke apart the landscape behind her, leaving long trail marks in the ground. Through this all, the short alien girl just kept taking it everything the older woman threw at her without moving a single millimeter. Pan received one last thunderous punch right in her face that surpassed all others' hits, but it seemed not even that was enough to make her blink, as she began to talk in a carefree tone as if she were speaking about the weather with Kushinada's fist still buried in her cheek. Ah, so it seems you know a thing or two about key reinforcement. You managed to land all those hits at full strength without breaking your own limbs. I must say I'm impressed. You certainly have polished your skills at a remarkable level. Maybe this battle will not be so boring to me after all. Pan declared with an impish smile at a stumped Kushinada, who could do nothing but blink in bewilderment at seeing how all of her powerful attacks had caused no damage to the girl from another world. The people around the world were also astonished at Pan's insurmountable resistance. Once more, we find Mills Lane between the next pair of combatants. All right, gentlemen, step forward, he signaled to Kenshiro and Akira Hongo, who complied with his instructions. Now, this is going to be a no-holds-barred fight without time limit. Normally I would be more concerned about presiding over a fight without rules, but since you two seem to be expert martial artists, I will assume you have a code of honor preventing you from pulling foul moves on your opponents. Anyway, you two will fight until one of you turns the lights off on the other. Any finishing or lethal move would be left up to your discretion. With nothing else to say, let's get it on. Mills Lane declared with his regular signature move before moving on the next pair of fighters. Akira Hongo vs Kenshiro. The young potential successor of Hokuto simply took off his thick-framed glasses to let his sight free from obstacles and put them inside one of his breast pockets before he began to unbutton his shirt. Akira Hongo just waited patiently until he was done, neither of them uttering a word. Finally, Kenshiro tossed his discarded garments to a side, showing he was done. I apologize for making you wait, he said as he cracked his knuckles and neck before he assumed a stance. Let us begin now. Hongo wordlessly acknowledged him with a nod before he assumed a stance of his own. Mills Lane was about to signal the start of their fight for the next fighters. Okay, let's get this done quickly, you two. Come over here, he signaled to Rei and Oganosuke, who promptly complied. Now you must already know what's this all about. You two will fight until only one of you is left standing. Killing moves are a possibility, but that's left up to you. Oganosuke interrupted the senior referee to make a comment. Oh, believe me, killing moves will be more than a possibility. They will be a certainty, he said as he displayed the edge of his katanas, making a point of what his intentions were for this match. Rei simply smirked back at him haughtily, not impressed by his little attempt at intimidation. Referee Lane just kept speaking, not bothering to comment. Whatever, just get cracking already. Let's get it on, he stated before stepping aside. Rei vs Oganosuke. Yogi Oganosuke crossed his blades in front of him as he beamed a cruel smirk. I will now show you that no unarmed art can save you from the cuts of my blades, he stated, his bloodlust becoming clearly evident to anyone who may be watching. Rei just chuckled in amusement, looking down at his opponent with disdain. You will soon discover how weapons are useless against the power of Nanto, he said as he displayed his glistening sharp nails. The senior referee was already about to call the next battle. Well, aren't you quite the big boys, the old man said as he stared up and looked between Ro and Sugetsu. Seems to me this will be a battle of heavy weighters. Anyway, you should know the rules already. Beat the crap out of each other until only one of you is left standing on his feet. So, let's not waste any more time and let's get it on, he said, again pumping his fist before moving on the next fighters. Ro vs Sugetsu. Ro took off his construction helmet from his head and tossed it to a side before he began to crack his knuckles, looking down imperiously on his opponent. Now, you are mine, I will punish you for daring to mock me, the next successor of Hokuto. Sugetsu replied to that taunt with a dark smirk. It is good that you are one of the successors of Hokuto, he said as he cracked his own knuckles. I always wanted to show how the strength given to me by following the path of Satsujiken is enough to even defeat the so-called true invincible style in the world. I should thank you for this opportunity. Ro's harsh stare wasn't affected in the least by that reply. You can thank me when I crush the life out of your body with my 2 hands, he said as he prepared to do battle. Mills was standing already between the next 2 figures. All right, you nagging pain in the ass, we have already reached your turn. he said rather crispy to Mihai Sturby. So, you wish to have a fight to the dead? Fine, go ahead. Get yourself killed for all I care. I can only wish that I could be able to see you trying to explaining to the guys in charge of hell, once you get there, how you got yourself killed by a metrosexual. I'm sure that will be something to feel proud about. He snarked with boundless sarcasm. Obviously the side user got pissed with the old man for implying he's going to get himself killed. Jura just flicked back some strands from his long mane as he spoke. There's nothing wrong with being a person that appreciates beauty, better to be a pleasing sight to the eyes than a horrid one. He eyed Mihai up and down with a look that couldn't be mistaken for anything else but disgust. I didn't say anything about being against men that like to wear makeup, that's their shit. I'm just saying that there is a limit on how pretty a man can get. Seriously, your beauty unnerves me. It's just too much for my senses to take. I can't even look at you straight without flinching back. Mills Lane said as he turned towards Judah and tried to look at him face to face only to fail miserably. The master of Nanto Kokaku Ken, instead of feeling insulted by those words, seemed rather pleased by them. Yes, I'm actually not surprised by your reaction. My beauty is just something that is beyond the eyes of mere peasants. He said, as he brought the back of one of his hands up to his chin in amusement. Right, so humble you are, whatever, just start killing each other already. Let's get it on, said Mills Lane, finally starting the battle as he moved towards the last remaining fighters. Judah vs Mihai Sturby, the side-wielding weapon master, hefted his weapon tightly towards him to show the sharpness of his blade. I'll make sure to mar the beauty of that face, pretty boy, before I kill you, he declared as he let his tongue out and began to lick around his mouth with it disturbingly. Judah just laughed openly, doing nothing to try to hide how little he thought of his opponent. For an ugly insect, you say the most funny of things, he said as he smirked down at the side wielder. Finally, Mills Lane had reached the two final combatants. Okay, you two are the only ones left. Hopefully this will be the last fight I will have to preside over for today, so I expect you should know the rules already. Fight until only one of you is left. So let's get it on, he said, pumping his fist for a last time and giving the green light for the last battle of the day to be carried out. Ogata Ishinsai vs Shin Ishinsai let out a chuckle, ecstatic that the battle he had been expecting with great eagerness had finally arrived. Yes, finally, there will be no more interruptions. We're only you and I now, so let's begin. I hope you don't disappoint me, he declared with a broad smile as he took a stance. Shin replied with a smirk of his own. Don't worry about that, I'll assure you, this will be a fight to remember, he said as he stretched all the fingers of his right hand in front of him, displaying the sharpness of his nails. Senzui vs Souther, knowing he couldn't make any kind of mistake against such a deadly opponent like Souther, Senzui prepared to toss himself at his enemy with an overwhelming attack in the hope of keeping him in the defensive. He spread his arms out in preparation for his attack. Souther did nothing and simply stood in his spot confidently, his arrogance being so great as to refuse to take a stance against his opponent. Senzui finally lunged at him as he unleashed hundreds of punches at supersonic speeds in an overwhelming destructive barrage of attacks. Souther decided to amuse himself for a bit and limit himself to evade every single of those punches as their surroundings began to be torn apart by the immense destructive energy packed in each one of them. Ninjutsu, Rengoku Suzaku no Mai. No matter how much he tried, Senzui was unable to land a single strike on his opponent. His desperation began to increase over time as more and more of his punches were evaded with ease, Souther keeping that arrogant smirk on his face the entire time, mocking his opponent as if to tell him how useless were all of his efforts were. Eventually, the master of Nanto Hooken retaliated and met his opponent head-on. He crossed his arms and opened them back again in a slashing motion as he clashed with his enemy in a brief exchange before both men passed aside from each other. Senzui turned his neck to look at Souther in distress, knowing that all of his attacks had failed. His shock increased even more when blood sprayed from thin lines that appeared suddenly on both of his arms, making it clear who had achieved the upper hand during their last exchange. From his spot, Souther just kept smirking, knowing exactly what his attack had done. Well, it seems this battle will not last for long, the blonde man said, as he turned his head to look at his opponent from above his shoulder with a haunting stare, terrifying Senzui even more, who could do nothing but sweat and gulp in his nervousness. Cyril Ramon vs Toki. Both men circled around each other, assessing each other for any sign of weakness or flaw in their defenses. As both were patient fighters, they took their time to ascertain the best way to strike against their opponent. However, they soon reached an impasse, as neither of them showed any kind of obvious weakness to be exploited, so Cyril decided to test and measure his opponent's defenses through other means. He suddenly joined both of his hands in front of him and sat in the ground in a meditative pose as he began to focus his ki. Realizing what his opponent was doing, Toki too decided to drop his stance and assumed a meditative pose of his own. He sat down in the floor cross-legged, his hands joining in his lap as he began to concentrate his own ki to repel Cyril's technique. From his position, the elder martial artist began to cloak himself with an aura of fear, as his focused ki became easily visible to anyone that may be looking. Even just glancing in his direction caused anyone witnessing this fight to feel a paralyzing feeling of dread at the back of their spines. Ramon then released a sharp sound and focused it into Toki's direction, using it as some kind of sonic projectile in which to channelize his aura of fear and strike the Hokuto successor in full with it. Fear Mantra. Toki fought the effects of the fear mantra with his own aura, as he focused his ki and enveloped his body in a cloak of calmness and ecstasy. And unlike the dark and oppressing aura that surrounded Ramon, his own was like a kaleidoscope of shifting and undulating colors that captivated everyone that laid eyes on it, bringing a feeling of relaxation and joy to all onlookers. As soon as he saw the fear mantra being launched towards him, Toki retaliated by opening and lifting both of his arms at his sides before performing a swiping motion with both hands and sending two waves of multicolored energy forward. Both energy waves clashed in the middle of the field and detonated with a blinding flash of light that forced all the people watching the fight to look away. On the field, both Toki and Cyril remained impassive in their respective meditative positions as their energies kept struggling and lashing violently against each other. Eventually, the light dimmed down to reveal that Toki had effectively counteracted Cyril's fear mantra, leaving only clusters of Toki's own multicolored aura floating around the field before dissipating into nothingness. Hokuto Ujo Hagen Ken. Yuching Po Yan Quan, Humane Face Breaking Fist. As the last vestiges of energy vanished from the field, Cyril Ramon opened his eyes in surprise, amazed how his younger opponent had effectively repelled back the entirety of his fear mantra. Fascinating, I see this battle will be most interesting indeed, he said as a smile began to form in his old creased lips. Pan vs Mikumo. Kushinada. The century-old beauty kept trying with all her might to cause any kind of actual lasting damage to her opponent. Yet for all her attempts, Pan simply shrugged off every single one of her attacks as if they were nothing. Although it didn't show on her face, Kushinada began to grow nervous with each passing second, even though her breathing was beginning to become heavy and faint traces of weariness started to settle on her limbs. It was clear that if things continued the way they've been going so far, exertion would make sure to cause her to lose this fight without Pan having to lift a single finger. That could not do, even if victory may be impossible, losing without making her opponent move a single muscle would be too much a humiliation to bear for the 100-year Grandmaster. With that thought in mind, Kushinada decided to change the style of her offensive. She was upon Pan from behind in an instant and placed both of her hands on the alien girl's shoulders. But as soon as she tried to launch the short teenager into the ground with her underground throw, she found herself unable to move Pan a single inch. Not even was she able to make her drop her relaxed cross-armed stance and brace herself against her technique. She just simply stood there with a bored expression as Kushinada used all of her strength to push her into the ground. After a while, no matter how much she tried, it was obvious she would never be able to move Pan. She tried different stances and throws from her knowledge of jiu-jitsu, but all efforts ran with the same luck. In the end she could simply look at her smaller opponent with an actual look of disbelief, as her breath had already become ragged and laborious and her countenance was no longer stoic and collected, but disheveled and frazzled. Pan simply glanced at the older woman once she saw her stopping all efforts to try and throw her. "You're done already. Just in case you haven't grasped the obvious already, you're never going to be able to move me no matter how much you try. My strength just surpasses too much your own, and no matter how skilled or how many tricks you know, Once I plant my feet on the ground, no strength or tactic, no man will be able to move me from my spot. But, I'll give you points for trying. It was quite entertaining to watch you going through all your repertoire of techniques before you realize the futility of your efforts, so. Are you ready to give up and become my personal servant now? She drawled with disinterest. Despite her tiredness, Kushinada's stare became determinate once more, and she stood up straight to prepare herself for one last strike. Not yet. I still have one last trick up my sleeve, she said as she took a defensive stance again. Pan lifted an eyebrow at that in curiosity. Oh, really now? Very well then, let's see it, she said expectantly without changing her relaxed posture. Kushinada took her offer and began to focus her ki. Her power level began to rise tremendously as she kept concentrating her energy for one last attack against her opponent. It took her a while to gather the energy necessary for this last attack, as she had to remain still in one spot as she concentrated and focused her ki, leaving her open and defenseless against any attack. But Pan was curious about Kushinada's secret ultimate technique. Feeling clearly the dramatic increase of her power, it really spoke well about her training, as she guessed the older woman power level was now around the 900s and pushing it towards the 1000. For a human, that was certainly strong, and she was pleasantly surprised of finding a warrior of her caliber on this planet. She didn't doubt it, she may as well had been the strongest woman on this world before her own accidental arrival. That warriors like her and many of the other Yami Grandmasters managed to hide their true power from her first general scan of this planet simply added more points for them. Still, nothing to worry over nonetheless. Though Kushinada was strong and she could respect her determination for having reached that level on her own, her level of power was still nothing against her. As Kushinada kept gathering her ki, the high concentration of energy began to become easily visible to any outside onlooker. The raw amount of ki easily shook the senses of all the people present in the field, even those without formal instruction in ki manipulation due to the sheer quantity that was being focused. Some even began to feel like fainting due to high concentration of energy overwhelming their senses. The people watching through the live feed saw how Kushinada began to glow like a Christmas tree, as her body was completely enveloped by white light. After a few more minutes, Kushinada finally released her technique, lifting a hand into the heavens as a giant white glowing silhouette of herself formed from behind her and rose into the sky with a roar, like a titan towering over most of the buildings in the bay. The giant ki projection of Kushinada was a glowing figure of light that could be easily spotted from miles around. All the people watching were simply left jaw-slacked at such feat, their expressions clearly saying WTF. Kushinada style 1000-year throw. Pan looked up at the towering figure of light and let out a long whistle in appreciation. Now that is impressive. I must say I'm honestly surprised by this technique, she said as she nodded her head in approval at the technique. Kushinada smiled viciously, thinking there was no way Pan could resist her ultimate technique despite her overwhelming strength. Let's see how you deal with this. The sheer quantity of ki that I have gathered for this technique can prove lethal to anyone that gets caught on by it. Let's test if you can survive where so many others have died, she said before snapping her arm forward and bringing her fist into the ground. The giant projection of ki mimicked head movements and slammed her own fist with destructive force into the ground, right between Kushinada and her opponent. From the point of impact, thousands of arms began to burst from the ground and lunged toward Pan, grabbing and taking hold of her from all directions. The alien girl's figure was simply swallowed by the sheer overwhelming number of arms covering her from all view. All that could be seen was a mound of piled up glowing arms, one atop another, quivering and shaking where Pan was supposed to be. For a moment, everyone thought that someone finally had managed to defeat the alien girl, that is until an energy beam broke through the mound of arms and slammed into the giant projection of ki, killing the glowing silhouette and making it fade away with a scream of death. The giant glowing figure toppled into the ground, crushing anything in its fall before it exploded into specks of light that soon dissipated into nothing. All the people watching could simply look in awe at how Pan reappeared into view, one arm extended and pointing slightly upward in the direction where the giant ki projection had been previously at, and for all intents and purposes unharmed. Now that was a very impressive looking technique. Sadly for you, it still wasn't enough to hurt me, she plainly stated before lowering her arm. Kushinada could simply look in disbelief, Her most powerful technique simply swatted aside like if it was nothing. She had put all of her energy in that last attack, leaving her barely able standing on her feet. Her legs simply gave up and she plopped to the ground on her ground, remaining there with a look of total incomprehension. How? That was my most powerful technique. The highly condensated amount of Ki should be enough to kill any living thing that gets touched by it. No human could ever hope to survive that, she said, her eyes wide and her mind still confused by the impression. Pan just crossed her arms back again and shrugged, looking down at the other woman nonchalantly as she slowly walked in her direction until she was right in front of her. You said so yourself, no human could ever expect to survive your technique. I am not human, if you remember, I do not possess the same weakness as your kind, they have all been eradicated by the blood of my ancestors. This is the great difference that exists between you and me. Now you understand why you'll never be able to defeat me. Kushinada's gaze unfocused a little in a faraway stare as if she had just become aware of some revelation. I see, and she indeed could see, for she had finally come to realize the extent of Pan's true strength. She spoke again. I understand, it was foolish of me to challenge you in the first place. There was never any chance for me to defeat you. You have defeated me utterly. All my attacks, all of my most powerful techniques were useless. All of my strength has left me. I don't even have the energy to stand up again. For you have broken my spirit and I no longer have the will to fight, but there is one last thing I must do. Kushinada said before trying to straighten her stance. She shifted her position until she was properly sitting on her knees in the traditional Japanese fashion in front of Pan. Even while on her knees, Kushinada could easily stare evenly at Pan's eyes due to the alien girl's short stature. The girl in question just kept looking at the older woman with an unpreoccupied air. Kushinada then suddenly put both of her hands on the ground in front of her and leaned her body forward in a bow until her forehead was touching the floor. I acknowledge your strength. You are indeed a powerful opponent far beyond what my own skills could ever hope to handle. As the winner of our combat, my life is now yours to do as you may see fit as agreed. And I as the loser can do nothing but accept your judgment. My fate is in your hands now, either command me and on my honor I will follow every single one of your orders without complaint from now on. Or deem my life unworthy to serve under you and put an end to it. She said formally without lifting her gaze from the ground and waited for Pan's words. The alien girl showed no particular reaction at Kushinada's proclamation, her face impassive as always. She brought a hand to the front, making it hover above the older woman's head. Suddenly, a bright ball of Ki appeared on her open palm and she pressed it briefly atop Kushinada's skull, the century-old grandmaster making no move still. Am I hearing right? Are you actually letting me pass judgment on you and you'll accept it? Do you know exactly what you are doing? I could decide to forget about all agreements made previously and punish you for your little stunt of trying to kill Diego Carlo against my wishes. I am still pissed about that, you know. I did tell you that I would kill you for it. The only reason I didn't was because I wasn't going to cheat my followers from having a fight of their own by killing one of their potential opponents. But since Yuri already got her chance to fight against you, maybe I should carry out with my previous statement and end your life right here in this instant. She said, telling exactly what was on her mind. Kushinada showed no emotion and calmly answered from her position without lifting her gaze from the ground yet. If that is your decision, so be it. The word of the strong is unquestionable, and you are the strongest in here, she said and awaited Pan's judgment without hesitation. Pan simply kept looking down at the prone bowing woman as if considering her words, her face betraying no emotion. After a moment, the ball of Ki dissipated and Pan let her hand to fall upon Kushinada's hair and patted her in the head. You do understand, I am pleased. I didn't expect to find someone here on Earth who would have such an accurate understanding of the Saiyan ways. So long as you remember who is the strongest, I'll have no issues with you. The alien girl said, beaming a smile. The century-old beauty finally lifted her gaze from the ground to give Pan a curious look, the girl's hand still on her head. Pan then stared at her right in the eyes with utmost seriousness. She put her hand under the older woman's chin and lifted her pretty face to force to look at her fully. From this point forward you are my servant, my slave, my tool, my right hand, the enforcer of my will. Your entire life will be dedicated to cater to every single one of my needs without fail and follow every single one of my whims without question. You will carry all orders I give to you with the utmost efficiency and destroy all enemies I told you without hesitation. In exchange I will teach you all I know and forge you into a weapon capable of cutting through all opposition, even those that dwell beyond this world. Know this is a great privileged position among my kind that I'm bestowing upon you. Should you ever betray me, your death will be a long and tortuous one, for I will not tolerate any kind of defiance. I will break you and grind all of your bones into dust with my bare fists before I smear you all around the ground until you are nothing more but a bloody stain. Only then will I allow you to die. Pan grabbed Kushinada by the neck and brought her forward to her face, leaving both virtually touching each other's noses as they stared each other in the eyes. Is that clear? Pan said with an unyielding gaze in a tone that brooked no questions. Despite the rough treatment, Kushinada didn't even flinch and kept herself from quailing under the alien girl's gaze, a testament to her mettle. She answered with a gracious nod. I understand, as I had said. My life belongs to you now to do whatever you may want with it. Pan scrutinized her expression for a second and then beamed into a smile. Good enough for me. Come, let us go back with the others. My hand, she said to Kushinada before she brought the older woman back with her towards the lines of her followers. From among the lines of Pan's followers there were some reactions at this new development. Kay turned towards his sister's clone and asked, Hey Whip, did it look to you too as if Pan was some kind of feudal lord gaining to loyalty of a knight or something? The white-haired fighter asked with a pointed look. I don't even want to think about it. That's too much foreboding for me, the brunette cutesy replied with a plain look. The rest of the followers simply stood there wondering that other things they would be able to see before the day is done. Ch 13. Fall of Yami Final Round Part 2. Akira Hongo vs Kenshiro. As soon as his opponent was ready, Hongo launched himself at Kenshiro, tossing an overwhelming barrage of multiple strikes with his fist. The Hokuto successor met the aggression without hesitation and parried all of the attacks coming at him with great accuracy. The people watching were only able to see hundreds of blurs flying everywhere being met by just an equal quantity of opposite blurs coming from each fighter. Kumade Rempa. Seeing how his assault was proving fruitless, Hongo decided to break their stalemate by lifting his left leg up before slamming it violently into the ground with great strength as to destroy the earth and send a powerful shockwave right at his opponent. Kenshiro had no choice but to cross his arms in front him and brace himself against the attack that struck him with great force and pushed him several yards backwards, his feet dragging the entire way as he resisted as best as he could against the hostile destructive forces slamming against him. Front kick. Kenshiro had no time to rest, however, because as soon as the shockwave died down and he brought his arms down, he found himself about to be struck by a spinning knife strike coming straight at his face. Superhuman fist flying swallow spinning swat. Kenshiro barely was able to avoid the attack by leaning backwards, the spinning strike passing very close in front of his eyes, enough as to feel the air pressures blowing in his face. He immediately retaliated with a kick, striking the offending arm, which immediately lost all motion and strength as it went limp. The limb was simply left hanging from Hongo's socket, who, despite being wearing sunglasses, one could clearly see the expression of surprise in his eyes. Hokuto Goken Bundan Kyaku. Beido Gengjin Fen Duanjiao, steel muscle cutting kick. Hongo jumped backwards and put some distance between him and his opponent. He then turned his attention towards his unresponsive arm. After assessing the damage done for a moment, he turned towards Kenshiro. It appears Hokuto Shiken is as effective as the rumors said. Clearly it is a remarkable style, he said with inscrutable stoicism, not worried in the least about his unmoving arm hanging limply by his side. Kenshiro acknowledged his words with a nod. Indeed, for 2,000 years Hokuto Shinken has stood as the truly undisputed invincible art in the world. You will find it to be no easy task to guard against it, he said, stretching his muscles as he took a guarded stance once more. I see, let us put that statement to the test, was all that Hongo said before he stabbed his limp arm on several points with the fingers of his other hand, regaining the movement of his paralyzed limb. Hongo then leapt back towards his opponent, using his incredible speed to create an overwhelming number of after images and surround Kenshiro completely with them. All of the Bunshin then pounced upon Kenshiro like a bank of piranhas on a prey, every single one of them launching an attack. Inu, Kyokuhajurrin. Kenshiro didn't despair despite the apparent imminent danger that he now found himself currently in. He just took a long breath before he unleashed a veritable endless storm of kicks all around him and destroyed every single one of the attacking after images. The Bunshins dissipated under the assault as Kenshiro kept launching his attacks until he found the real Hongo. Senryenkyaku. Chiam Lien Jiao, 1000 group leg. Once he finally managed to find the real Hongo, Kenshiro proceeded to redirect his attack towards him. However, he didn't expect to find such a sudden strong resistance once his leg managed to connect in full on Hongo's side. The sensation of feeling his leg suddenly stopping his motion in cold against the sunglasses-wearing Grandmaster left him helpless in a sudden state of shock, as to allow Hongo to counterattack by flexing his muscles and deliver a powerful straight right at Kenshiro's chest with all the strength of his constricted musculature behind, sending the potential Hokuto successor flying away through several yards. Senken Tsuki. Kenshiro struck the ground with great force, blowing a great quantity of dust and debris away. He rose back to his feet with a grunt, wondering what had just occurred. How did his opponent manage to withstand his kick with such seemingly ease? The pointed-eared headmaster must have seen his confusion reflected on his face, for he made sure to comment on it. "What is it? You seem hesitant all of a sudden. You better don't start taking your attention away from our battle," he said, before he rushed at Kenshiro again, traversing the distance between them in an instant as he launched a spinning knife strike that was supplemented with one of his knees pushing over the elbow of his attacking arm. God hand leg wave twist thrust. Kenshiro leapt to a side to avoid the incoming strike just in time. The attack struck a mound of debris and steel refuse that was behind Kenshiro, a leftover from the collapse of the building under construction. The spinning knife strike simply rammed through it like it wasn't even there, sending pieces of masonry and steel beams flying everywhere. Hongo kept running forward without stopping due to his attack's own momentum and rammed into a second identical mound of debris, and then a 3th, a fourth, a fifth and finally a sixth before he managed to come to a stop, kicking an enormous cloud of dust and leaving a long trail of destruction marking the path of his attack. The people watching around the world could only stare gobsmacked at the power of the long-eared karate master. Hongo didn't let go from his offensive that easily, and as soon as his motion came to a stop, did he blasted towards Kenshiro again with another powerful spinning knife strike. Kenshiro decided to take the initiative and leapt towards his opponent to avoid the incoming attack and retaliate from the air with a diving kick. He smashed into Hongo with great force and managed to interrupt his attack, but once more he found his strikes to be unable to cause any lasting damage on his enemy. As he pondered on this, the long-eared Grandmaster counterattacked with another of his infamous knife strikes at close range. Due to the extremely close proximity between the two, Hongo's strike didn't manage to gather much momentum or create the centrifugal forces necessary to punch through Kenshiro's body. But it was strong enough for him to sink his four main offensive fingers deeply in the left side of Kenshiro's abdomen, making the imposing young fighter grunt at the sudden wound, even though the position had been rather awkward, making Hongo stab him with his fingers being wide open instead of closely together. Sensen body. Kenshiro pushed himself away from his opponent, bringing a hand to cover his wound as he gazed cautiously at Hongo. "How? I must assume you must be using so kind of technique to shrug off my attacks. Even my own brothers are not reckless enough to allow themselves to be hit by one of my punches in full." Hongo faintly smirked at that statement, pleased that Kenshiro had picked up on his trick. "Phew, you are correct. The reason I'm able to withstand your attacks is because of my Sensen body. A technique that allows me to harden all the muscles of my body at once, making them stronger than steel. You cannot see the technique in action because of my coat, so allow me to make a demonstration," Hongo said before he began to unbutton his coat and discard his clothes until he was bare-chested just like Kenshiro. The long-eared Grandmaster then moved towards a nearby pile of debris and grabbed a very large and thick steel beam from it. Hongo grabbed it with both hands and held it aloft above his head with his two arms completely stretched upwards. He then released a loud heave, making all the muscles in his body to suddenly harden and constrict at the same time, displaying all of his impressive musculature that indeed seemed more solid than any metal, before he plunged the thick steel beam downwards into his own abdomen. Ha! Clank! To the surprise of all the people watching the transmission, the heavy steel beam bent and buckled against the hardness of Hongo's abs, showing without a doubt that his muscles were, as he had claimed, harder than steel. The sunglasses-wearing master kept stabbing himself with the steel beam into his abdomen several more times, until the once straight and solid bar of steel was nothing more but an oddly shaped and flattened piece of refuse. The people around the world could simply stare with an expression of O_0. In the Kanto region, 0_O. In the temple where the Norns lived, 0_O. Up in heaven in the Yggdrasil control room, 0_O. Even Lind was impressed. Down in Niflheim, ahahahahahahahahahahahaha. Only the laughter of a certain snow-haired Damakaicho could be heard, echoing ominously throughout all of Niflheim and scaring the hell out, no pun intended, of every single one of her underlings. In certain abandoned building, with a certain blonde demoness. Fucking shit. That was so awesome. In a certain cafe in Shinjuku, 0_O. Down in the office where the souls of the dead are sorted out, with a certain infant wearing a hat marked Junior 0_O. In a certain dojo where a certain pig-tailed martial artist lives, 0_O. The pig-tailed martial artist in question, whoa, cool. Certainly the people around the world were rather impressed by Hongo's physical prowess. Back on the devastated construction site, Hongo simply discarded the deformed piece of steel to a side under the gaze of a mind-boggled audience. You see, as long as I'm using my sensen body, none of your attacks will be able to hurt me, he boasted with complete certainty. Kenshiro showed no worry at his opponent's declarations and simply replied, "If your muscles are indeed stronger than steel, then the strength of my own punches will have to be greater still to break through them," he stated with absolute unflinching conviction. Hongo just raised an amused eyebrow and said, "Oh, and how do you intend to accomplish that?" Kenshiro brought himself to stand right again and took his hand off his wound, standing proudly in front of his opponent. A normal human body, no matter how much is trained, can only use 30% of its strength at most. But thanks to the techniques of Hokuto, I am able to utilize the remaining 70%. He stated before taking a long breath. Suddenly his muscles began to constrict and harden, their bulk and mass increasing exponentially. One could see how the muscles strengthened, separated and grew at least 3 times that of their normal size. By the time Kenshiro's muscles had stopped growing, the young successor of Hokuto had turned from an already formidable and burly man to a literal mountain of muscles, making for an equally awe-inspiring and terrifying sight and causing men all around the world to suddenly feel their masculinity threatened. Tenryu Kokyu Ho. Zhuanglong Hu Shifa, Art of Dragon's Breathing. The expression of all the people watching the fight after witnessing such astounding display of raw power could only be described as jaw slacked. In the Marizata residence, the Norns and their mortal friend were also flabbergasted by the shocking display of sheer physical power, especially a certain little and spunky goddess of the future. Wah! How could he get so big? It doesn't make any sense. I've never seen someone so big before. A rather stupefied Skuld said as she pointed at the TV. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Erd suddenly began to laugh after hearing that statement from her younger sibling, and fell to the floor on her back as she clutched her stomach. "Why are you laughing? Stop it. Erd no baka," said Skuld as she snapped at her elder sister, who simply couldn't stop the droves of boisterous laughs that came out of her throat. The goddess of the past finally grew quiet once the little goddess of the future smashed her technological advanced mallet into her head. In Kanto, the collective armies of students could only stare with bugged-out eyes and an expression of woe. Dude, they could only gape in disbelief after seeing Kenshiro's shocking growth spurt. Most of the boys like Kenichi that were watching the feed began to feel rather intimidated as a sudden rush of male impotency began to wreck at their pride. Well, except Nagi, who was equal parts envious as he was impressed. God damn it, I wish I'd be that buffed. The ladies, on the other hand, were dumbfounded by a sudden rush of contradictory feelings. They felt scared and intimidated by the impressively frightening bulk of Kenshiro. But at the same time, fascinated and marveled by the fine specimen of desirable grade S, not A, S. beefcake right in front of them. To say they were showing interest would be an understatement. Both Ryabi and her tomboyish friend Shuhei, were simply unable to resist the mind-blowing sight of pure manliness being displayed in front of their eyes. Their mouths simply hanging limp as they watered down with a flood of drool that fell from their chins into the ground, their faces looking as if about to burst due to how red they were. Their eyes suddenly rolled to the back of their heads and they lost all consciousness as a massive fountain of blood suddenly surged from their noses, drenching all the people that were standing in front of them with their vital liquid before both girls were knocked down on their backs into the ground by the pressure escaping from their faces. Splurt. Splosh. Ah. What the hell? What is this thing? Is it blood? Hey. Who forgot to wear a tampon? Why I am suddenly covered in blood. I'm not in my days the fuck. You're not even a girl dude. Is there something you wish to confess? Somebody should close her legs before we all drown. Kanu turned and kneeled in front of the downed girls with a concerned expression. My friends, are you alright? Answer me. And let's not start with the goddesses up in the Yggdrasil control room, who were also impressed at Kenshiro's physique. Chrono could just stare at the screen with a hypnotized gaze as she struggled with some awkward feelings she had never felt before, her face a nice shade of cherry red. Lin-sama, I don't know why, but I find the sight of this shirtless, bare-chested man to be rather yummy. The Valkyrie in training said to her superior officer at her side as she kept staring and began to fantasize about how much she wanted to touch those muscles right now. Behind Chrono, the other three goddesses on their seats could only agree to that statement with a numbed nod on their blank glazes. Aha! Lind didn't reply immediately to her subordinate, as she squirmed uncomfortably in her spot for a moment because she too was finding herself bothered by the sight in front of her. She grudgingly had to admit that her underling had a point with a nod of her blushing face. I guess you're right, Chrono, she succinctly said before returning to the transmission. Back to the battle, Hongo simply took a look at the results of Kenshiro's technique and commented. I see, most impressive certainly. Well then, there is only one way to know for sure which of our techniques is superior. He calmly said as he took a combat stance. Kenshiro showed his agreement with a wordless nod, before taking a stance of his own. Then, let us resume our battle, he said before both combatants rushed at each other. Hongo charged with another of his spinning knife strikes with his left hand towards Kenshiro, who didn't even blink at the incoming deadly attack and met it head-on. Just as he was about to be struck by the drilling hand, did Kenshiro evaded the attack by lunging low and to a side before he flung himself at the right of Hongo's abdomen. Kenshiro struck with a palm strike setting his open hand completely on Hongo's side and began to exert pressure as he used his other hand for support by grabbing his right wrist with it. The attack didn't seem to do any harm to Hongo, who let out a victorious yell at seeing the apparent failure of his opponent's technique. It's useless. Nothing can break through my sensen body. Exclamation mark. The boast of Hongo came to a jarring halt as he began to feel something was wrong. He turned to look at the invading hand that was grabbing him and trying to break through the hardness of his muscles. There was a brief intense struggle, where the people watching could clearly see the expression of incredulity in Hongo's face, and then the fingers of Kenshiro began to sink inside the karate master's flesh. Slowly but surely, Kenshiro began to close his hand inside Hongo's body, his fingers breaking and tearing through the muscles in their way until they closed completely into a fist before the young Hokuto successor punched his entire hand inside the long-eared man's abdomen in a show of raw physical strength and blood. The audience watching could only gape even more at such feat of unbelievable power. Hokuto Koritsu ha, Beido Ganglai ba, steel-rending grasp. For a moment, both combatants remained locked in this position. Everybody watching believed this was going to be the end of the fight, as Kenshiro kept pushing his fist more and more inside Hongo's guts, who was actually flinching at the pain. But then the karate surprised them all when he lifted his arms in a horizontal L position and began to retaliate with a simultaneous barrage of short-ranged spinning knife strikes with both hands. Kenshiro was caught off guard by the counterattack, but he reacted quickly and pulled his bloodied fist away from inside Hongo's abdomen, a trail of blood being left behind. Jinenken Nejiri Nukite. Kenshiro did his best to try to avoid the barrage of spinning knife strikes as he tried to move away from his opponent, but Hongo was not going to let him go that easily after the damage he had inflicted on him, so he went after him and harassed him with dogged determination. Kenshiro lifted both of his arms to block the double knife strikes by setting his own on the crook of the offending limbs. Yet despite that, Hongo almost managed to stab him in the chest. If he had reacted just a millisecond too late, the long-eared man would have without doubt skewered him already. Kenshiro pushed his opponent off him with a kick to the stomach, and both combatants took the chance to catch their breath for a moment as they stared fiercely at each other. I am impressed that you managed to counterattack despite the grievous damage that I inflicted upon you. Either your resistance to pain is extraordinary or it is the result of some secret technique I am unaware of, Kenshiro said in an impassive tone. Hongo acknowledged his statement with a nod. You are correct yet again. It's thanks to the secret breathing technique Naizoage that I was able to weather the worst of your attack. This special technique allows me to raise my internal organs up to my ribcage to protect them from damage. The glasses-wearing man said as he leaved himself open to show his body. Some lumps underneath his skin were clearly seen moving from his chest down into his abdomen, giving credence to his explanation about the Naizoage. I see, so that is the reason why you were able to retaliate so quickly. Thanks to that technique, I failed to do any kind of critical damage to your vital organs, and all I did was simply pierce your skin. Kenshiro pondered out loud, figuring out exactly what had occurred. Even though you managed to break through my sensen body, with this technique I was able to render your own attack useless. But enough of this, let us continue with our fight. Hongo said as he took a somewhat relaxed defense stance, bending his right-left slightly forward. Kenshiro agreed with a nod and took a stance of his own once more. He carefully approached his opponent, being on the lookout of whatever other trick the Karate GR Nadmaster may pull, as he by now was clearly aware that Hongo was a very resourceful opponent. Kenshiro approached the other long-eared man with measured steps. Hongo bid his time by following the younger man's movements. Once they both were back in striking range, Hongo acted by charging at Kenshiro with a step forward. The imposing successor of Hokuto prepared for the attack and became ready to retaliate. Only to be caught completely off guard by the fact that Hongo was moving backwards instead of forwards and launched a kick with the leg that seemed to be in the front, but in reality was in the back. Gamaku. The kick struck Kenshiro full on the head, who could only look at the assaulting limb in shock as it connected on his brow. An optical illusion, he thought as he reeled a little from the impact. But he shook it off promptly without letting his guard down, a good thing since Hongo was soon upon him. Kenshiro tried to leap away knowing he was in a disadvantage, but Hongo pursued him with a barrage of multiple upward knife strikes as he tried to intercept the young Hokuto successor in the air. At least, Hongo was attacking with normal knife strikes instead of his more destructive spinning ones. Thank the heavens for small mercies. Metsujouu Rego Unukite. Kenshiro did his best to protect himself against the assault despite his disadvantageous position by counteracting with his own fast barrage of hand thrusts while in midair, using a technique he had witnessed and been victim of during a sparring match with his now estranged third brother Jaggy. Just as Hongo's knife strikes tried to pummel his upper chest and head, so too Kenshiro's own knife strikes tried to strike the long-eared karate master in those same areas, making for a fast-paced exchange of blurring attacks that parried themselves completely against each other. Hokuto Senju Satsu, Beidochian Shosha, Thousand-Hand Murder, both fighters separated and landed back into the ground after their exchange. Kenshiro stumbled a little and fell down on one knee, blood running down the side of his face due to a cut on his brow, as Hongo had managed to land several hits on him, leaving him a little beat up. The sunglasses-wearing Grandmaster smirked from his position, believing himself the victor of their last exchange, only for him to suddenly spat blood and almost collapsing into the ground. Hongo immediately looked down in alarm to check upon the condition of his body, only to his surprise, to find that Kenshiro had too managed to land many hits on him, as the welts that suddenly began to appear all over his chest and abdomen could attest to. And it seemed the young Hokuto successor did also landed them with great accuracy, better than Akira's own, as every single one of them had struck in a vital point on Hongo's body. It was pretty clear to him that Kenshiro's attack had been more devastating than his own. The Karate Grandmaster was not amused by this discovery and turned to glare at Kenshiro with seething anger. Hongo took out his sunglasses for the first time in the entire day and stared at Kenshiro with heavy resolve. Enough. It's time for me to end this. he said before he pushed himself back up with some effort and faced Kenshiro again with his Gamaku technique one more time, believing it would give him an advantage against the Hokuto practitioner as the technique had already proved effective against him. He was surprised when Kenshiro managed to block the kick from the correct leg, this time using only one finger. A technique already employed against Hokuto seldom manages to achieve the same results twice. You will need more than just an illusion if you wish to defeat my style, Kenshiro stoically said as he rebuked his opponent's attack and pushed the offending leg aside. Hongo frowned a little at seeing his technique was no longer effective, but he remained impassive and decided to change his strategy. I see, then I guess a change of tactics is in order, he said before he began to take several long breaths as he raised both of his arms and held them in a vertical L position at both sides of his body in a defensive stance, keeping his hands stretched and on the ready for anything. Maeba no Kamae. Come, face me and show me the strength of your style, Hongo said, daring Kenshiro to attack him. The young practitioner of Hokuto accepted his challenge, but not without taking a cautious approach first. He took a moment to assess the stance of his enemy before rushing at him with a barrage of punches to test his defenses. All of Kenshiro's strikes were blocked with ease, as all that the pointed-eared master had to do was to bring his arms down or up to parry all of the incoming punches. Kenshiro rammed up his speed, increasing the intensity of his assault, but the result was the same. Hongo had effectively created an unbreachable defense against any attack. Kenshiro's train of thought was interrupted as Hongo tried to land a kick on him as a counter-attack. The burly man simply evaded the attack by leaping calmly backwards a little, putting some distance between the two fighters and bringing another pause to their battle. Your defense is certainly impressive, but how you expected to win this battle if you only remain on the defensive? He asked with a pointed look. Why don't you keep attacking me and find out? Was Hongo's simple reply. Kenshiro suspected something was afoot, but had no other option than to keep trying and find a way to break through Hongo's defenses. He once again went to confront his opponent with another flurry of attacks, but Hongo's defenses blocked or diverted every kick and punch sent on his way. Kenshiro was about to think which technique would be appropriate to counteract the long-eared man's stance, when suddenly, Hongo struck by rushing at him as he diverted one of Kenshiro's punches, leaving the brawny fighter open to an attack. The eyes of the karate master seemed to shine with a terrible light as he unleashed his counterattack upon the defenseless Hokuto successor. Hongo took advantage of his current defensive stance to raise his arms completely into the air before he began to repeatedly strike all over Kenshiro's body with an overwhelming barrage of both kicks and punches. The imposing young man could do nothing but endure the rain of blows that pummeled him all over. He tried to resist the best he could, using the fortitude granted by Hokuto to withstand the tide of pain. A last punch sent him spiraling into the earth. Kenshiro managed to at least get back to one knee after impacting into the ground. He had managed to weather out the storm, but it had clearly taken its toll on him as his entire body was filled with bruises and scrapes, blood dribbling down the corner of his mouth. Shinchi Nengen Ryu Shuryu Kan Ku Shirini. As you can see, even if you have managed to break through the thickness of my muscles, that is not the only defense I have, Akira declared, raising his arms back up in an L position at the sides of his body in the effective Maeba no Kamae stance. Kenshiro just looked up back at him from his kneeling position with a determined stare. Then I guess I'll have to break through this new defense too, he simply said. Hongo didn't want to admit it, but he was concerned about that declaration. He now clearly realized why Hokuto Shinken was known for being the true undefeatable art in the entire world. If he made a single mistake, he knew his defeat would be all but inevitable. I don't know what tricks you may have up your sleeve, but I will not let you land on me any of your techniques. With the Maeba no Kamae I can divert or block anything thrown at me without any danger, he replied, putting a calm front. We shall see, was all that Kenshiro said before getting himself fully upright again. He then joined both of his hands in front of his face in a meditative stance and began to concentrate, his ki increasing and slowly becoming more and more visible as he focused his energies for his next attack. Once he was done, he charged at his opponent without further ado. Hongo stood at the ready, prepared to block any attack that Kenshiro may try against him. Kenshiro struck towards him with a simple vertical chop with his left hand. Hongo brought down one of his arms to try to block the attack, but was utterly surprised to see his opponent's arm passing through his own as if it wasn't even there, like some kind of ghost. Hongo didn't have much time to try to decipher what had just happened, as Kenshiro was attacking now with his other arm. Akira brought his remaining limb down to block, but just like last time, the arm of the Hokuto successor seemed to become ethereal and passed through his own without being hindered whatsoever. Once more a shocked, puzzled look fell upon the karate's master face, only for an elbow strike to land in full on top of his head. Kento Shidan. Quan Dao Shiduan, fist-stealing, discarding resolution. Akira was pushed backwards a few steps due to the strength of the blow, his face still locked in alarmed surprise as he still could not comprehend how Kenshiro was able to break through his defenses. What happened? He asked, incredulous. He tried to raise his arms back up again and resume his defensive stance once more, but failed and found himself unable to lift his arms in the air. What is this? What is wrong with me? My arms feel so heavy and weak when I try to lift them above my head. Hongo said in shock as he struggled greatly to keep his arms aloft in the air only to fail miserably. Kenshiro answered him calmly. It is the result of my Kento Shidan, a technique that allows me to penetrate through an opponent's defenses and weaken their arms as to make them unable to raise any kind of defense anymore. You will find that your arms do not have the strength to resist any kind of attack nor able to use them to protect yourself any longer. He said with certain finality. Hongo just glared, not amused by that answer. Then I guess I'll have to defeat you with one last decisive strike before you have the chance to do the same to me. As they say, the best defense is a good offense. Kenshiro just shook his head in a negative. It's useless, the strength of Hokuto can't be defeated that easily by any other art. You have witnessed this already, you should back down and admit your defeat. I'm not eager of destroying such a remarkable martial artist like you. He pleaded, trying to dissuade Hongo from continuing the fight, lest things keep escalating and he became forced to put down the long-eared master in a more permanent fashion. Hongo was not of the mind of giving up however, and declined the offer of the younger martial artist. I'm sorry, but I'll have to disagree. It's not in my nature to walk away from a battle while both I and my opponent still stand on our feet. Let us end this once and for all. I need not my arms to defend myself, nor would I wish to finish this battle without having witnessed the full scope of Hokuto. He said, preparing to charge at Kenshiro again. The formidable young warrior could only let out a tired sigh. If that is your wish, he said before taking a stance of his own. With no further words, Hongo launched himself towards Kenshiro, who answered the challenge and moved to meet his aggression head-on. Kenshiro lashed towards the long-eared man, believing he had no more means to defend himself, but at the last moment Hongo stopped in cold and changed his stance, easily sidestepping Kenshiro's attack by a narrow margin. The young Hokuto practitioner could do nothing but stare in surprise for a moment as he realized he was now at a disadvantageous position with Hongo flanking him from a side. Dakki Kuzushi Gawashi. Hongo, having successfully gotten inside Kenshiro's space after evading his attack, could not help but gloat in glee. You're mine, he said, before raising his arms at shoulder level in a horizontal L position again, and rammed them forward with two of his infamous spinning knife thrusts right towards Kenshiro's chest, trying to impale him. Knowing that at this distance the other man could do nothing to try to block his attack. God hand inu kyokua nukite. Kenshiro could do nothing to try to evade the attack at this short distance. In act of desperation, he brought a hand up to restrain Hongo's left spinning arm to keep it from skewering him alive. The feat had not been easy, but he managed to struggle steadily, but greatly, against the centrifugal energy being created by the spinning arm. But despite that small victory, Hongo was still undeterred. In fact, the young Hokuto successor had just been played right into the karate master's hands. That was just a feint. This is the real attack, he declared before ramming his other spinning arm in full right in Kenshiro's chest. For a moment, all the people watching the fight remained silent in shock, believing Hongo had killed the Hokuto successor. Those of frail sensibilities simply took their gaze away or covered their eyes, unable to stomach seeing the death of such a great man. Everybody was caught by surprise, when despite all odds, Kenshiro was still standing after that last attack. Ellipsis. Exclamation mark. What? Hongo exclaimed in surprise, discovering only the tip of his 3 lead fingers had managed to pierce Kenshiro's chest, right above his left bicep, because the young Hokuto successor had managed to catch Akira's spinning arm by the wrist with his other hand just in the nick of time. Impossible. All the people watching were left speechless, gaping in disbelief at seeing Kenshiro restraining the struggling arm of Hongo in his grasp. 3 fingers stabbing him by their tips as both fighters began to desperate push against each other, trying each one to become the sole victor of their combat. The 2 combatants struggled greatly for a moment, but then Hongo rammed his knee into his elbow to give more strength into his arm and sinked his fingers even deeper into Kenshiro's chest. The formidable young warrior reacted to the pain for just a moment, but then a look of resolution fell upon his face and he redoubled his efforts against Hongo's assault. His muscles constricted even more and he began to slowly, but steadily overcome his opponent. Hongo struggled with all his might against Kenshiro's strength, but he could do little to withstand against it and his arms were pushed, struggling and trembling away from the powerful young Hokuto practitioner. For a moment, he could only just stare at the younger man that was restraining his arms aloft and pushing him away at the same time. How? Kenshiro did not reply and just kept applying more and more strength to push Hongo back, taking out his 3 stabbing fingers off his wounds to leave another 3 puncture marks atop of his bicep to accompany the other 4 running down his side. Once he had effectively gotten the long-eared man off him, did Kenshiro let go of Akira's wrists, only to stab all of his stretched fingers at the base of each of his palms. Hongo looked puzzled for just a second, before all of his hand fingers suddenly exploded, clumps of blood and muscle tissue bursting forth in sprays of gore and fragments of bones left hanging from torn flesh, Kenshiro having utterly destroyed his opponent's ability to launch more spinning knife strikes. Hongo could do nothing but scream in shock and pain. Ah! Goshi Retsu Dan. Wuji Lai Dan, 5-finger fury bullets. The people watching could just stare gobsmacked at this turn of events, every single one of them paralyzed by shock and awe after witnessing the terrifying efficiency of Hokuto to utterly destroy any opposition. Kenshiro did not stop his counteroffensive just there and tossed a mighty straight punch right at Hongo's face. To normalize that punch seemed to divide into many and the long-eared karate master found himself being pummeled by a barrage of thousands of punches striking him all over his face. One last mighty punch striking him in full before sending him flying several yards and crashing with a ponderous impact into the ground. Hokuto Senjukai Ken. Beido Qian Shouwai Quan, Thousand-Hand Destruction Fist. Hongo, despite his wounds, managed to stand up again, refusing to surrender, no matter that his hands were completely destroyed. No, I will not let it end like this, he yelled, forcing every single ounce of strength he had left to stay upright. Please, cease this senseless resistance and accept your defeat. I have already taken from you your means to attack and defend. I do not wish to continue causing you harm, Kenshiro said, trying to be diplomatic and end the fight before he found himself forced to break the long-eared man completely. But Hongo was never one to give up no matter the odds. Never, he said before he blasted towards the younger man with all the strength left in his legs. He then struck by lifting a single leg and launching hundreds of kicks with it as he moved it around in a swirling spiraling pattern, creating a small vortex of kicks that crashed into Kenshiro in full. Uzmawashi Zan Rin Jerry. Kenshiro just took the brunt of the attack without flinching and braved through the rain of blow to retaliate with his own attack, his muscles bulging a bit more as he let his fury fuel his actions and give him strength. He let out a yell and unleashed his own storm of punches that overwhelmed and broke through Hongo's own barrage of kicks before sweeping him aside under the sheer number of attacks. Waka, Hokuto Hyakuretsu Ken. Beido Bai Lai Quan, 100 Crack Fist. The inert body of Akira Hongo Simple fell into the ground and didn't try to get up again, his lights finally been turned out. Mills Lane approached to call out the fight. He's out. The winner of this fight is the Hokuto style. Akira Hongo vs Kenshiro. Kenshiro wins KO. The tall imposing young man let out a tired sigh as he let go of his technique to use all of his body strength, his muscles reducing back to their normal size. I find no joy in having brought so much pain to such formidable warrior, but I am honored to have fought against him in honorable combat, he simply said, before going to check on the condition of his downed opponent. The reactions at the end of this combat did not wait. Pan was openly giggling, yes, giggling, in merriment after watching the end of the gruesome battle. Now that is what I call a fight. I'm so happy right now. I really enjoyed the battle between these two, it made my blood run hot. Hongo certainly did well despite his loss. At her side, Kushinada was standing waiting at the ready despite her own battered state. You are pleased with the result of this battle even though Hongo was unable to achieve victory in your name, my mistress. She asked in the most polite tone she could muster. It would not do to displease her new master so soon after having her life spared just because she didn't watch her tongue when she had tried to voice her grievances. Of course, there was no shame in his defeat. He gave his all to try to win and never backed down despite things turning sour for him. He fought like a true warrior and gave us one of the greatest battles ever to be witnessed in the face of this planet for our enjoyment. I say he did a damn good job even though he lost in the end, and it's not like his opponent hadn't it easy and did not had to put some serious effort to earn his victory. Pan simply retorted nonchalantly. Kushinada had to admit her new master had a point. She had enjoyed the battle and was pleased to see again two real fighters fight with all their strength after so many decades. She nodded. You are certainly correct, my master. It was quite thrilling to see such competent fighters face each other with all their might. I suppose you will be giving Master Hongo the proper medical care to fix the damage to his hands. I can only imagine it would be quite the laborious task. Pan just bristled at that observation from her new personal enforcer. As I had mentioned before, the medical advances of my race are so above the standards of this world. His hands having exploded is nothing. I just have to collect all the bone fragments from his fingers and put them back in the correct place before healing him. Or I could simply regrow some new bones to replace the ones he lost, or clone him some new hands altogether. To fix his destroyed hands is but a mundane task to me, she said with no small amount of arrogance. Kushinada just acknowledged her words. Your knowledge and discoveries are certainly impressive, my master. The rest of the world was simply gaping jaw-slacked after seeing such unbelievable combat. Kenichi was the one who surmised the general opinion with a single sentence. That was the manliest fight ever. Ch14. Fall of Yami Final Round Part 3. Rei vs Oganosuke. Yogi Oganosuke didn't wasted any time and charged after his intending victim, unleashing a flurry of slashes that threatened to cleave Rei apart. But the master of Nanto Suchoken didn't seem any worried about the storm of steel and he deftly and gracefully evaded every single of the attacks, only for the slashes at the last second to abruptly change their motion and strike towards Rei from his blind spots. They suddenly changed their trajectory. The young Nanto master realized as he took notice of the danger. He got away with a backflip to escape from his enemy, but Yogi was not undeterred and went after him with his swords that seemed almost alive as they traced all of his movements and suddenly changed their trajectories to strike him from unexpected angles if he managed to evade the initial slash. Rei was forced on the defensive and to keep moving and leap around if he wanted to avoid Oganosuke's swords. Yogi Kakua no Tachi. It is useless. No one can escape from my swords. They will chase you to the ends of the earth if necessary until they have tasted your blood. The bloodthirsty swordmaster said as he kept harassing Rei with his barrage of attacks. You. Rei said nothing to his adversary as he suddenly stopped in his tracks and began to ascend high into the sky with a high-pitched terrifying shrill. Oganosuke simply froze on his spot in perplexity as he had suddenly lost all sight of his opponent. He began to look all around his surroundings and even up but he was unable to find any trace of his victim. What? Where did you go? Come back in here and die like a man, he said in frustration as he kept searching for his opponent. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him and Oganosuke turned and looked up to see Rei coming at him in a free fall from a side. A look of puzzlement fell on his face for a moment as his brain tried to process what he was witnessing. The remorseless swords master tried to leap away in alarm despite his surprise, as Rei delivered a cross slash with both of his hands towards him. Yow! Oganosuke thought he had been able to evade the attack just in the nick of time despite having been caught off guard by it, but suddenly a long cut appeared and began to bleed freely on his face. right in the middle of his brow and above both of his eyes, blinding his vision with his own blood. The swordmaster brought both of his hands, still clutching his swords, to his wound at the sudden sensation of pain, unable to comprehend how or when he had been tagged. His face contorted by a mixture of shame and rage. How was this possible? He bellowed with affronted outrage as he looked at the blood falling from his face and staining his own hands red. Suzaku Tensho. Zuke Zanshang, Vermilion Bird Unfolding Flight. The furious swordmaster turned towards Ray with a look of pure and unadulterated hatred. You will pay for this humiliation. He raged with burning wrath. The young master of Nanto Suchoken simply blew some air in disdain. Empty threats from a second-rate swordsman. If you really think you'll be able to defeat me, then put those words into actions and come at me with everything you got. He said as he took a combat stance again. Ro vs Sugetsu. The two big formidable men glared at each other for a moment. Sugetsu, knowing about the reputation of Hokuto Shinken, knew he could not afford for his opponent to make even a single attack or his defeat would be all but certain. He prepared to blast at his opponent with all of his speed. But just when his feet had barely shifted in their standing, did Ro acted first by sending powerful pressure waves of Toki from his hands that struck the Chinese Kempo master in full. Sugetsu was forced to defend himself at the sudden assault and crossed his arms in front of him to brace himself as best as he could as the pressure waves began to claw all around him, tearing and ripping his clothes in several sections. Believing the attack was over, Sugetsu lowered his arms only to discover Ro coming straight at him at impressive speeds. You are a fool for believing you could face me. Now suffer the wrath of Ken-O. Ro declared as he delivered a flurry of rapid-fire punches towards his opponent. Sugetsu was once more forced on the defense as he tried to guard or evade the punches raining down on him in such an overwhelming barrage. He believed himself successful as he broke away from his opponent and put some distance between the two, but suddenly he felt himself grow weak and almost folded over himself. He took a look to his arms and was able to see red mists and crimson sprays spurting from his skin. Hokuto Shu Renda, Beidoji Lien da collected barrage. What? My blood is escaping through my pores. He stated with great shock. The laugh of Ro brought his attention back to his opponent. But of course, my Hokuto Shu Renda can drain the blood of my enemies even if they manage to block or evade my punches. So you see, there is nothing that can save you from my attacks. The merciless Hokuto successor said before he lunged at Sugetsu again. Now, die, he declared as he approached his opponent while launching a powerful uppercut. Sugetsu, after hearing Ro's explanation, knew he couldn't let that punch to be completed. So the Chinese Kempo master anticipated Ro's intentions and stopped the other man in cold with a powerful strike to his midsection in order to interrupt the incoming attack before it had a chance to be fully thrown. The strike was powerful enough to make Ro grimace if only slightly. Conrare Yusho, but Ro's attack could not be stopped that easily, for even if his fist had been halted, the airflow accompanying it was more than enough to still reach its objective and strike Sugetsu in one of his vital points. The head of the imposing bearded man was snapped back by the sudden impact and a spray of blood spurted right from the middle of his forehead. Sugetsu could do nothing but remain with an expression of disbelief on his face. It can't be. Hokuto Iden Sho, Beidoyi Dian Zhang point chime. Ro just smirked at seeing his opponent's expression. As I had said, no one can escape from my punches. He stated as he sent an ominous stare of doom at the helpless Chinese grandmaster. Sugetsu could not stop himself from gulping as cold sweat ran from the back of his neck. He just now began to realize how much out of his league he truly was. There was nothing he could do now but bite the bullet and hope that if he keeps fighting hard enough, somehow, someway, he may be able to get out of here alive by miracle. Judah vs Mihai Sturby. Once their battle had officially started, Sturby didn't wasted time and lunged at his opponent with a disturbing face that clearly showed the heights of his deranged bloodlust. He swung his scythe at the unconcerned master of Nanto Kokukuken, who didn't even bother to raise any kind of defense and simply dodged the hundreds of slashes that the crazed weapon master threw at him with seemingly ease, much to the ire of the scythe wielder. Stand still and let me cut you into pieces. Mihai yelled with boundless frustration as he fruitlessly slashed with his scythe, causing great destruction to his surroundings but not even managing to ruffle the hair of his opponent. Judah just scoffed and swiped with his nails at the crazed European man. Mihai showed he was more than just a reckless berserker as he managed to block all of the slashes made by his opponent as he kept attacking at the same time, showing a very great deal of skill in the process. Side slashing. Ha, you'll have to do better than that to stop me. Thanks to my side mastery I'm able to attack and defend myself at the same time. You can do nothing to block my attack, only die by it. Mihai yelled as he kept slashing his weapon all over the place. Yuta just frowned and made a face, before he immediately retaliated with a fast exchange of claw strikes with both of his hands. Mihai kept launching his attacks as he defended himself, but suddenly his side fragmented in several neatly sliced pieces. A look of puzzlement fell on his face for a moment, before several long cuts appeared on his torso with copious sprays of blood. His expression of shock was simply priceless. Kesho shi. Shui zhuang zui, blood-adorned beak, wah what. Sturby was barely able to mutter before Judah appeared right in front of him with his index finger pointing right at the middle of his brow. Ellipsis. Exclamation mark. You bore me already, just die like the lowly vermin you are. Judah said imperiously as he towered over the astonished Sturby, before he slashed down with his finger and split Mihai right through the middle in two identical halves. A fountain of blood soon ensued as internal organs were spewed all over the floor and both halves fell to the ground with a meaty thud in a gruesome gory show. The people around the world just stared mouth agape at the violent grotesque death that befell the crazed side wielder. Nanto Yoso has on. Nando Ying Jiao Pozan, Hawk Talon Ruin / Mills Lane just grimaced at the fate suffered by Sturby. Well, it seems my premonition became a reality after all. No need for me to say who the winner is, that is obvious enough. He just said with a shake of his head. Judah vs Mihai Sturby. Judah wins fatality. The Bishonen red-haired man simply passed one hand through his well-cared mane without any care in the world, clearly telling to the entire people watching that killing a man in such a brutal fashion meant nothing to him. What a monumental waste of my skills and time this so-called battle has been. That scum wasn't worthy of facing me in battle. He should count himself lucky that I gave him a fast end. Judah said with boundless disdain. The reactions to such gruesome death did not wait. With the Norns, Skuld was just too shocked by the unrestrained violence. He split him in half with only one finger. Oh Kami-sama, who are these monsters in human skin? The girl exclaimed, too shaken up by what she had just witnessed. Her sister Beldandi couldn't come up with any answer, and the eldest of the three, did just kept staring at the TV screen with a sober serious look. I don't know Squirt, but this is clearly something that should have never escaped our attention. She said, wondering who was responsible for having dropped the ball so badly. These dangerous people and their deadly arts should be all recorded in the Yggdrasil, as nothing that happens on the Milky Way, especially on Earth, is beyond the supercomputer knowledge. So how it is that none of the three goddesses knew about these formidable humans? She doubted the rest of her fellow goddesses up in heaven knew about this too, as they are even more ignorant regarding the human world than she and her sisters, who have been living for the last couple of years among the humans with Keiichi, smells to conspiracy to her. In Kanto, the students gathered there were also horrified and gobsmacked by the savage execution. My God, what a monstrous strength, Kenichi said in a state of frozen shock. The girls accompanying him, Miu and Renka, could only nod numbly with their own horror-stricken faces. The rest of the Shinpaku Alliance and the leaders from the Kanto schools were too stricken by the brutal display of unbelievable physical strength. Pan just whistled after witnessing the brutal execution, clearly impressed by the ruthlessness of Judah. Now that was amazing, especially as it was done by a human. These Nanto practitioners are certainly something else. They are strong enough to defeat Saiyan civilians without formal training. They would have been a nice challenge for me when I was but a toddler. She stated with a pleased smile. Her minions just nodded in acknowledgement. After seeing the powers she has displayed, how easily she destroyed the Yami Armada, they now did not even thought to question her words. Ogata Ishinsai vs Shin. As soon as the battle began, Ogata's demeanor made a 360 and turned from an eager but respectful person to that of a completely serious and terrifying murderer. He glanced at Shin with a completely merciless face whose eyes shone a deep red to display his growing bloodlust. "Let us begin already," he said, before charging at his opponent in a burst of speed, moving in such a fast rate as to leave a stream of afterimages behind him wherever he went. Ogata Ryuu sliding feet. Ishinsai then lunged at his enemy with a powerful spinning heavy punch, trying to ram it through Shin with his high speed. Ogata Ryuu Hakuda Gekijin. The blonde young man didn't even try to block or evade the attack. Instead he decided to face it head-on with one of his own as he stabbed forward with a barrage of knife strikes with his ringed hand. Shin easily sidestepped the punch aimed at him as he kept moving and stabbing at his opponent. Both fighters passed each other after a brief exchange of attacks and remained motionless while giving their backs to each other. Shin appeared totally unharmed while his opponent didn't look any worse for wear too. But suddenly, Ogata began to spit blood and fell to his knees as several stab wounds appeared on his midriff. It was clear who had gotten the upper hand in their little exchange. Senju Zan, Qian Shozan, Thousand Hand Slash. Despite having been wounded by his opponent, a big smile appeared in the blood-dribbling mouth of Ishinsai, a small chuckle rasping from his throat. Finally, a real opponent, he declared as he turned to look at the impassive blonde Nanto user. Senzui vs Sother. The former one shadow of the Nine Fists could do nothing but look at his opponent with mounting terror and apprehension, his arms still bleeding by the deep cuts inflicted during their previous exchange. Senzui well knew that Sother could kill him anytime he wanted, as there was nothing he could do to stop him in his present condition if he suddenly got bored of playing with him. The master of Nanto Hōken just glanced at his opponent with a look of vexed disdain. "Are you simply going to be shivering in a corner like a scared rat instead of standing up and facing me like a man? I thought you were a master of martial arts. Either you stop wasting my time and fight me already, or I'm going to hunt you down and kill you where you stand like a maggot. So you better decide quickly before I lose my patience and make that decision for you." Sother warned with a low threatening and dangerous tone in his voice. Senzui sweated cold and cursed under his breath. Knowing he needed time to come up with a plan soon, he decided to stall things up or at least hinder Sother enough for him to think on something at his leisure. "You'll have to catch me first." He goaded at his opponent, which in hindsight it's a terrible idea. I mean, what kind of idiot in his right mind would willingly goad a remorseless killer like Sother into attacking him? As he created a multitude of afterimages all around him to guard him from attacks on all directions. "Lies or truth. Double-headed crow of darkness. Let us see if the almighty Grand Master of Nanto Hōken is smart enough to find the real me among all of my copies." All of the Bunshin said mockingly with fake confidence. Sother was not impressed in the least by that little trick. He scoffed, before disappearing from all sight altogether and reappearing among the lines of the clones, slashing away with such force that all the illusions were simply swept away under the assault. Each slash bringing down scores of clones, making them disappear into nothing. Sother quickly dispatched all of the Bunshins, leaving only the real Senzui standing, who was unable to move for a moment due to the surprise of having been found so quickly. Sother wasted no time and slashed at the defenseless ninja, who only got enough time to harden his muscles with his Rentegai technique in order to avoid being skewered by the blonde man's nails. The swipe struck him in full, although he wasn't sliced into tiny little pieces. Long cuts started to appear all around his body, which then began to bleed profusely. His chainmail, might as well he should not have bothered to wear it, as for what use could some steel rings linked together would be against the slashes of someone who can turn diamonds into dust with only the pressure exerted from his fingers. Senzui could only stare in disbelief at the condition of his mangled body. Sother just smirked at his handiwork. "Come on, don't tell me you've had enough after just one little exchange," he mocked before charging at Senzui again. The former one shadow could do nothing but try to evade the barrage of slashes as best as he could, each one of them deadly in its own right. Senzui had a hard time to counterattack, for if he were to throw a punch of his own he would run the risk of losing a limb. In his desperation, he began to launch wildly attacks in a flurry of his own, but all he got for his trouble were more bleeding gashes appearing on his legs and arms. If things kept going like this, he would soon lose the use of his limbs. Even using the toe and hand seals of his Sokuinsu Koshu seal and Insu double kick seal techniques to improve the strength and speed of his attacks was not enough to match Souther's sheer viciousness. All it did was to delay the inevitable. As they kept trading blows, and spilling more blood around the place while they were at it, Senzui suddenly placed his left arm on the right side of his abdomen as he put his right hand on his left elbow. He then stretched one leg forward and bent his knee as he readied his other leg behind him for a devastating kick. He then charged at Souther with all the strength of his body focused on his back leg in a powerful attack. Houu Shin Met Shuguri. As Senzui came flying at him at great speeds, Souther took to the skies with a mighty leap and delivered an overwhelming barrage of rapid-fired stabbing attacks with both hands down towards his incoming adversary. Senzui, in order to avoid being impaled by his own momentum, was forced to break his charge and meet his opponent with another fast-paced exchange of blows in midair. But Souther proved himself once more the superior martial artist, as he stabbed Senzui in the left side of his chest, breaking easily through his chainmail as if it wasn't even there, before sending him back down smashing into the ground, a long trail of blood escaping from his gaping wound and marking the trajectory of his descent. Yusho Gaku, Yushang Yu. Distant soaring peak, Senzui struck the ground with a great impact, expelling a wide and thick cloud of dust. Many former members of Yami smirked at seeing the one-way beating that their former One Shadow was receiving. Clearly there was no one in the field who felt even the slightest amount of pity for the former head of Yami. Senzui struggled harshly to rise up from the crater where he had been buried. To all the people watching he clearly looked like complete shit, his body bleeding from all places due to all the cuts inflicted on him. A serious nasty bleeding hole on his chest, the trauma and scrapes inflicted by his fall. Well, let's just say he ain't winning any kind of beauty contest soon. With a superhuman effort, the One Shadow managed to stand back on his feet again, his mangled wrongly applied pride keeping him from accepting defeat. No, it cannot end like this. This is not how things were supposed to be. He mumbled to himself in a half-delirium. Souther touched the ground again and approached Senzui at a leisured step. Well then, it appears it's time to put you out of your misery, he uncaringly said as he readied his nails again. Senzui turned to look at him with an uncomprehending gaze for a moment, his mind needing some time to catch up with the latest events, before his features began to be overtaken by a look of pure hatred. You, how dare you humiliate me like this? I was supposed to be greatest martial artist ever. My style reigning supreme above all others, but you and the Nanto sects had to get in the way. Why don't you all just die? He raged in a deranged fit, the state of his mind deteriorating quickly as he began to raise his ki and gather all the energy he could within his body. A dark sickly-looking aura appearing and enveloping him all around, Senzui was clearly lashing against anything he deemed a threat now that his back was fully against the wall. It will not end like this. I will not let it end like this. Die, he yelled before he lunged at Souther as he overloaded all of his nerves and pressure points with his dark ki, making them explode in a blast of concentrated energy that he then directed towards the unfazed Nanto master. Shinogidachi, Souther just smirked, amused at his opponent's desperate last-ditch effort, and rushed forward to meet the attack head-on, slashing away with both of his hands as he did so. His movement speed was so great that he seemed to disappear for an instant before reappearing behind Senzui, his arms stretched wide open at his sides as evidence of the attack he must have performed. Souther grimaced a little, despite having avoided being hit by Senzui's technique due to his high speed. The close proximity to the thick ki aura that the former One Shadow exuded was enough to sap some of his strength and make his body feel numb. Souther just shrugged the feeling off, unwilling to be distracted by small hindrances, and waited for the effects of his own technique to take place. Senzui stopped in his tracks. Despite his current mental state, he was sound enough of mind to realize that his attack had failed miserably and began to puzzle over as to how his opponent had managed to evade the heavy stream of ki. His musings came to a jarring stop as two deep long nasty cuts suddenly appeared with a serious burst of blood on his chest. The cuts intersected by the middle, making it seem as if a long bleeding cross had been carved through the entire length of Senzui's thoracic cage. The ninja simply stared, seeing how his flesh had been sliced so deeply as to allow his bones and internal organs to be glimpsed through the bleeding gashes. It was simply a horrible, nerve-wracking sight. Blood then began to flood and escape from Senzui's mouth in great torrents. staining his whole chin and most of his neck red, his expression still that of frozen shock. He only had the strength to bring one of his hands up at eye level and see it soaked completely in a brilliant red, before his legs gave out and he fell face first into the ground as more and more blood kept escaping from his wound. Through all this, the terrible and cruel laughter of Souther could be clearly heard echoing in the background. KYOKUSEI Juji Ken. Jishing Shizi Quan Polestar Cross Fist. Mills Lane decided to call the fight at that moment. That's it. This fight is done. The winner is the guy of the Southern Cross, he said, motioning towards Souther, who was still laughing with that monstrous laugh of his at the savage execution he had just committed. The people of the world were simply scared shitless of him. Senzui vs Souther wins fatality. Just like with the previous battles, the reactions at the end of the fight were immediate. Pan simply watched the unfurling events with a thoughtful expression. Around her, her most trusted followers, that is the most hardcore or bloodthirsty, watched alongside her with contemplative gazes of their own. The other more sedated and calmer of her followers, simply watched as they winced or cringed slightly at the brutal carnage, shaking their heads in disapproval. Behind all of them were the remaining apprentices from Yomi, now fully inducted as new recruits of the Shinpaku Alliance, many of them simply gaping with horrified expressions. They knew that battles to the death was an expected normal occurrence as followers of Satsujiken, but damn, this was simply too gruesome to witness. At length, Pan spoke. Well, that was shocking and bloody. This Souther fellow not only is strong, but also merciless, vicious, remorseless, frightening, and his methods are cruel and terrifying, she said as she trailed off and grew pensive at the end. A clearly amused mature turned at her with a raised eyebrow. Does that mean you like him and approve of his methods, oh mistress of mine? She said cheekily. Damn right. In Kanto, the gathered students could simply gape in shock and horror at the merciless Grandmaster of Nanto Ho'oken, none of them wishing to ever face such a monstrous man in combat. Most of them were clutching at their chests, both boys and girls alike, feeling shivers under their skins and bones as they were unable to help but wonder how painful must it be to have one's chest cleaved open in such fashion. The Ryazanpaku Grandmasters were also reeling from the brutal execution. By Kami, that Souther guy killed Senzui as if he was nothing. Just how powerful the Nanto Masters truly are if they can kill a Grandmaster, the leader of Yami, with such ease. Sakari wondered in shock. Alongside him, Kensaima and Akisame were staring at the transmission with stoic, sober expressions. Both were aware of the rumors surrounding both Nanto Seiken and Hokuto Shinken, so they knew what to expect. Nonetheless, it was still a very terrifying thing to witness. Hayato Furunji was too, looking gravely at the unfolding battles. He was the only one among the people present who had seen such terrible styles in action in the past. He never had thought he would witness such butchery again in his life, not after so many decades. The only one who wasn't totally awestruck at the violence was Miu, who, despite also feeling the techniques of the killer styles to be too gruesome, couldn't help but feel a great deal of satisfaction at seeing the man who had murdered her mother in front of her, causing her a great deal of mental trauma and make her hate her own father for deceiving her into believe that he was the culprit, die in such brutal and painful manner. She knew it was not right that she should feel such glee at seeing another human being killed, but she couldn't help it. Because of that man she had lost both of her parents, the two people she had loved the most in the entire world. In her opinion, it was such an amazing thing to see that man being erased from the face of the world. Good riddance, she thought. Kenichi was able to notice on her face the myriad of emotions she was feeling and became a little worried about the sake of the girl he was infatuated. Miu, are you all right? He gently asked with concern, as he set a hand upon her shoulder to make her turn towards him. Miu was startled for a moment at being suddenly pulled out from her thoughts. But after seeing it was just Kenichi and once her brain was able to acknowledge his words, she just smiled pleasantly at him. I'm okay, Ken-kun. Everything is all right now, she simply said as she kept smiling broadly. Kenichi wasn't so sure what to make of her answer but decided to leave it at that. If you say so. Up in heaven, Lind was more and more astounded at the impressive techniques displayed by these true warriors. The rest of her fellow goddesses may be appalled at the brutality of these fights, as their blanched faces could clearly tell, but she wasn't fazed in the least. For she was one of the Valkyries, the elite military unit of the armies of heaven, Death and bloodshed walked hand to hand alongside her. And she wasn't any regular Valkyrie either, but their leader. She commanded all the troops into battle and led them into victory against any odds. War and martial combat ran in her blood, and it is because of this that she is able to truly appreciate the true beauty of these styles. These, oh, so perfect and efficient styles clearly designed as the epitome of lethality, it made her feel giddy and warm on the inside. The flame that kept burning inside her blazed higher even more, threatening to spill out at any moment. Cyril Ramon vs Toki. Both men were still locked in a struggle between their auras. For a long time they kept pushing their energies against each other, one trying to consume its target, the other focused only on repelling the aggression. Their auras clashed with such destructive force in the middle of the field, breaking the place apart on their battle for dominance. It really stood out how both of the respective fighters were simply placidly seated on the ground in deep meditation while their auras lashed violently against each other. Eventually, both fighters decided they were getting nowhere and unanimously stopped their meditations and got back to their feet. Cyril stood at his full height and addressed Toki. It seems this battle between us will not be decided by the strength of our auras. Only through martial prowess will be able to break our stalemate. The old man said as he took a stance. Toki agreed with a nod. It is as you said, esteemed elder. If it is all right for you, I would like to show you the perfect respect as my senior by granting you the honor of the first move. He said with complete calmness as he took a defensive stance by relaxing his body and muscles. Such a nice lad you are, that is mighty generous of you. I am grateful and accept your offer then. Cyril replied with a smile, before he lunged at Toki with a powerful downward double knife strike aimed at his torso. Johariran type A. Toki was ready for his opponent's attack, however, thanks to having taken his time to prepare himself and easily sidestepped Ramon's attack by simply yet gracefully spinning to a side. Cyril's strike impacted on the ground, breaking the earth with a mighty shock, and he turned his head to look at Toki with a curious look, wondering about the particular way the young man had evaded his attack. Cyril discarded such idle thoughts off his head and proceeded to charge at Toki again. He unleashed a fast-paced flurry of singular finger strikes with only his index finger, trying to pierce the pressure points of his opponent. Marmachada dance. Hundreds of one-fingered thrusts rained down upon the young Hokuto successor, yet despite such overwhelming barrage, Toki evaded them all with such graceful and gentle movements that to everybody watching it seemed as if he was dancing. Not only that, but he also redirected the force of Ramon's attack against him and counterattacked with several pushes and stumbles of his own that seemed inoffensive at first sight but in reality were strikes especially aimed at the elder man pressure points. The Kalarapayatu master found his attack halted by this excellent defensive technique. Hokuto Musu Ryubu, Beido Wu Shang Lu Wu, nil thought flowing dance. Cyril himself was really amazed by the gracefulness of Toki's movements. You move with such ease and fluency like that of a calm stream. Your defensive skills are truly remarkable. The two figures broke away from each other, putting some distance between them, and Toki acknowledged the elder man praise with a small polite bow. I thank you for your kind words, elder. This is my Hokuto Musu Ryubu. It allows me to clear my mind from all thought and external distractions in order to anticipate and counterattack any attack made at me by using the own strength of my attacker against him with least amount of effort possible from my part. An impressive technique indeed, Cyril admitted, appraising Ly. However, there are ways to catch even the most slippery of opponents. The old man said, before he sent a powerful energy wave at his younger opponent as he lunged forward with a two-fingered strike. The energy formation seemed to take the shape of a trident from behind Cyril for a moment before it tried to ram in full into Toki. The young dark-haired man was surprised by the sudden key attack, knowing he could not counteract such technique with his Hokuto Musu Ryubu. Toki tried to escape from it by leaping backwards as he braced himself the best he could by crossing his arms in front of him. The key wave still struck him and sent him flying away, but despite having received the strike, Toki managed to control his landing with several rolls in the ground, coming finally to a stop as he crouched on one knee. Vishnu Trishul wave. Toki didn't have time to catch his breath, however, because as soon as he came to a stop Cyril was again right upon him, swinging his arms back and forth several times in a knife-like manner as he pointed forwards with two fingers in each hand. Durga's Dan Maruma. But Toki didn't lost his composure despite the apparent danger. He just took a sharp breath before he lunged low to avoid the arm swipes at such speed that it seemed as if he had disappeared from all sight altogether. Rahman was caught off guard by that sudden display of speed. Before he knew it, Toki was already underneath his guard, launching a fast-paced flurry of knife strikes at his unprotected abdomen aimed at specific pressure points. The fingers of both of his hands pointed forwards. Sichi Ten Shou, Chi Dian Zhang, 7-point palm. However, and without notice, against all expectancy, Toki suddenly stopped cold in his tracks just when he was about to land his hits and began to clutch at his chest in a coughing fit. This outcome was so unexpected that even Cyril was confused, for he knew none of his attacks were the cause for this sudden interruption. "Are you all right, youngster?" the elder Kalaripayattu Grandmaster asked not unkindly, approaching to assist the younger man. Toki was unable to reply as he kept coughing his lungs out. Eventually he began to calm down after he spat a thick wad of phlegm mixed with blood. He tried to compose himself the best he could to address Cyril. "I'm sorry for this inconvenience, esteemed elder. I'm afraid my health is not in the best optimal conditions. My body is being assailed by a strange nefarious disease. It sometimes acts up strong enough to hinder my performance," he explained with a small smile. Rahman was surprised by that revelation, so too the people watching the fight. "You mean to tell me you've been fighting all this time against me while being sick? Your willpower must be truly remarkable and worthy of praise for you to have kept your condition hidden so well thus far. But regardless, I would advise you to stop taking foolish risks and admit defeat so that you may go to rest. It would not sit well with me if I were to win our fight because of that disease tearing at your body. There is no honor in fighting against a sick man," the old man said sternly, not wishing for the spirit of their fight to be tainted by this external factor. Toki just kept smiling as he stood up again. "That would be unnecessary, esteemed elder. I assure you this little interruption will not happen again," he said, before he began to make use of the Tenryu Kokyuho breathing technique to use the entire potential of his body and increase the mass of his muscles trifold. "Thanks to the secrets of Hokuto, I am able to keep at bay the disease that assails my body, at least for enough time for us to have a proper fight," he said, displaying his impressive musculature before taking a defensive stance. Rahman appraised his young opponent for a moment before giving his answer. "I see, very well, let's us continue then. Just don't expect me to show you any kind of consideration despite your condition," he replied as he took a stance of his own. Toki just gave an amused grin. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Ch 15.